учитывать, принимать во внимание гендерные аспекты при разработке экономических программ развития, потому что эти вопросы осветит наш следующий спикер. Это профессор Американского университета, декан Института послевузовского образования, директор программы гендерного анализа в экономикс, профессор Микки Мёрс. Профессор Мёрс является международным экспертом нашего центра, и мы очень благодарны ей за бесценный вклад, который она вносит в дело развития нашего центра и в развитии гендерной экономики как науки для Казахстана и по всему миру. Программа гендерного анализа в экономикс готовит экспертов, гендерных экспертов для Всемирного банка, для Организации Объединенных Наций, для Международного валютного фонда. И мы искренне верим и знаем, что ее вклад для нашего центра бесценен. Я благодарю всех за внимание. Здесь вы можете следить за новостями нашего центра. И хотела бы предоставить слово профессору Микки Мёрс. Для этого я как-то должна отсюда выйти. Вот так, наверное, да? Угу. Алишер, я не слышу, остальные слышат?
Кажется, нужно звук в колонках включить, чтобы было слышно.
Алишер, попробуйте, пожалуйста, еще раз и звук попробовать.
Слышно, да?
Нет, не слышно.
Мне было слышно, только тихо.
Да, теперь слышно, но тихо.
Women's ability to develop their capabilities and participate fully in the labor market benefits society as a whole by increasing economic growth, raising tax revenues, and supporting pension contributions, among other things. At the same time, of course, women themselves benefit as they gain greater financial security, more control over key decisions impacting their lives, and are better able to support their children. Supporting women's ability to contribute fully to the economy involves at least three key pieces. First, women must be provided with equal access to education and training. Second, women must be freed from the highly unequal care burdens which limit their ability to fully participate in paid work outside the home. Third, when women are engaged in labor market work, we must ensure fair and equal treatment. On the first of these, providing access to education and training, Kazakhstan has done well by global standards. Compared to men, women are about equally educated when measured by years of schooling, although more work still needs to be done, as is true across the world, in improving access to STEM education for girls. But effectively enabling women to participate fully in the labor market is more complicated. Because women typically provide most of the care for children and elders, this adjustment involves trade-offs which policymakers must consider. What are the relative benefits of encouraging men to take on more care? In OECD countries, evidence suggests that when men take on greater paid parental leave after the birth of a child, they develop stronger bonds with their children and participate more in their care, and in later years. Women return to the labor market sooner and thus earn higher average lifetime earnings and enjoy greater career success. Such rebalancing of work and care responsibilities results in greater reported satisfaction for both husbands and wives. Would families in Kazakhstan experience similar benefits from such policy? Expanding state or market provision of paid care can also reduce the burdens on women and families and is an important part of current policy in Kazakhstan. But so far, it has had limited impact on the incorporation of women into paid work. What are the conditions under which more families would be willing to send young children or elders to paid care facilities and carers be more willing to take on paid work? What would be the cost of the required types of care? For families that cannot or will not make this change, what would be the cost and benefits of providing more financial support, pay, labor rights, pension contributions for the women who take time to provide care, as is done in some European countries? Finally, which policies would allow women to move into the work that provides the best return on their time and skills? And what would be the benefits of such policy? Which anti-discrimination laws are needed or need better enforcement? Which unspoken social norms limit better labor force engagement? And what are effective ways of beginning to change these? Of course, in the age of COVID, these questions have become all the more important. Which policies will ensure that, as the economy opens, we build back better, as U.S. President Biden likes to say, protecting the rights of all citizens, male and female, to participate fully in work and family life? Successful development of policy requires careful analysis of the sort that your center supports. It's been a pleasure to see the center at work, to see how you have helped to coordinate the use of the rich data that your National Statistical Office collects, how you have supported the fellows in collecting their own data to assess the rapidly developing impact of COVID, and how you have effectively begun to disseminate the results of this research. The analyses that the fellows will present today, while of course preliminary and partial, provide important insights which will play a role in emerging policy debates, starting right here today. I wish you a fruitful discussion.
Спасибо большое за теплые слова, и мы передаем слово Алишеру Килбаеву. Пожалуйста, Алишер.
Good afternoon, dear participants of this conference. Can you hear me?
Yes, Alisher, we can hear you well.
Okay, so let me start my presentation. So we are doing this study within the frame of this of the project funded by Soros Foundation Kazakhstan, as my guru has mentioned. And the topic of my study is short and medium-term effects of COVID-19 pandemic on paid and unpaid work among men and women in Kazakhstan. Before starting this study, we have done some background, some literature check, and if we look at the worldwide, so there's such situation in the world. So there are a growing body of literature which suggests that COVID-19 pandemic has widened the gender-based gap between men and women around the world. There are more and more evidence which suggests that more women, as opposed to men, have experienced employment-related difficulties, such as job loss and reduction in wages and unpaid furlough. And furthermore, the closure of schools and daycare centers and correspondingly rapid shift to online education and to work brought women to their so-called traditional roles, where they are supposed to take care of their children and do most of the housework. And as a result, most of the unpaid work, the amount of which increased during the lockdown period, fell on the shoulders of women. So what is the situation in Kazakhstan? So unfortunately, limited to my knowledge, there are no empirical research in Kazakhstan which deals with this problem. And today I would like to share some of the preliminary findings of my research. So I have done an online survey with a sample of so there are 491 respondents of this survey, and some of the preliminary results of the survey are presented in the following slides. So we can, if we look at the whole sample, so 491 people, so among which approximately 60% are women and 40% are men, and around 85% of all respondents are from three largest cities, Nur-Sultan, Almaty, and Shymkent. So if you look at the graph, and if you look at the whole sample, so even before pandemic, we have some gender gap in unemployment. So more women as opposed to men were unemployed, and the difference is by 8%. And during the lockdown from mid-March to mid-May, this situation worsened a bit. So the difference, the gender gap in unemployment increased to 10%. But now, approximately February, March 2021, it again decreased to almost pre-pandemic levels. But if we look at only at the sample who have children between age 0 and 6, the situation is a bit worse. So gender gap before pandemic was 15%, and this situation worsened and increased to 23% even. And even now, 1 year after pandemic, we still have a relatively high gender gap. It somehow returned to pre-pandemic levels, but still it's very high gender gap. If we look at the gender gap in wages, again, so before the pandemic, and if we look at the whole sample, before pandemic, women were earning approximately 28% less than men. Situation worsened a bit during the lockdown, with women earning by 44% less than, by 34% less than men. But now, 1 year after pandemic, it came to the pre-pandemic levels. But if we look at only the sample with children, again, the gender gap was higher, and the increase in gender gap was also higher during pandemic, during the lockdown. And today, 1 year after the pandemic, gender gap somehow decreased, but it's still higher than the pre-pandemic level. So it didn't reach to pre-pandemic levels. So in terms of gender gap, we didn't yet come back to pre-pandemic level. And lastly, if we look at the unpaid work, again, so if we, for example, look at childcare, the time spent on childcare, on active childcare. So before pandemic, women were spending like 111% more time on childcare. But this gender gap narrowed during lockdown. So more men started to devote their time on childcare. And today, 1 year after pandemic, gender gap has worsened, but it is below the pre-pandemic level, which seems good. So men are starting to devote more time for childcare even before the pre-pandemic period. If we come to the housework, the time spent on housework, the gender gap was higher than on childcare. But then again, this gap decreased during lockdown period. But now, after 1 year after pandemic, it again returned to the pre-pandemic levels. So we can say that when it comes to housework, men have returned to their routine levels. So these are the preliminary results of the survey, and I'm still doing the analysis part, and yeah, some new insights may emerge during this analysis. So if you have any questions, I will be glad to answer. Otherwise, so that's it.
Thank you so much, dear Alisher. And Almira, please, the floor is yours. Then our next speaker, Almira Tabayeva.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Just a second. Can you see?
Yeah,
Mhm.
perfect.
Okay. So, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Almira. I'm a research assistant at Nazarbayev University, and I'm very happy to present my preliminary findings on the topic that I've been exploring and working on. So, the topic is challenges of doctoral mothers and possible policy changes, case study of Kazakhstan. The initial data was supposed to compare Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, but the data collection is being collected now in Uzbekistan and it's not finished. That's why today I will be presenting only the findings for Kazakhstan. So we know that gender difference are now not only in policy and economy, but in academia as well, where mother scholars suffer disadvantages, publishing less and seeking to balance multiple rules, especially during unprecedented times of COVID-19. And past literature has shown that academic mothers' challenges have been explored widely, but only in the West, without focus on Central Asia. Therefore, this qualitative comparative study intends to find out what it is that might be distinctive about dilemmas and conflicts mothers in academia face in Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, and possible institutional policies that need to be introduced in the educational system. So the urge of researching mother scholars came from my own position as a working mother in the field of research. And as I come from Uzbekistan and residing in Kazakhstan, I decided to compare these two countries. So the preliminary findings for Kazakhstan was done in top universities. So first, I want to talk about the differences between the countries. As Kazakhstan, there were about 128 higher education institutions in Kazakhstan, according to the Bureau of National Statistics, and only 70 of them provide PhD programs. So in Kazakhstan, the number of doctoral students who dropped before graduation has increased dramatically. If in 2019 there were 1,775 doctoral students accepted, 222 were dropped before graduation. And mainly, mother scholars fell victim of such sacrifice because of the lack of systematic support by government. And I will talk about the policies and actions to mitigate the motherhood responsibilities by the government, and the society can benefit all scientists. So if I talk, so what are the main drivers of doctoral mothers dropping out and low status in academia? I think that we should pay attention to the fact that our government lacks supporting doctoral mothers who are torn in tackling multiple roles and cannot be as successful as others. So what are the reasons for that? The recent pilot survey in a top international university and in a leading state university of Kazakhstan revealed that doctoral mothers, first of all, face a lack of financial support. So it was found that the international university with foreign faculty provide almost twice more stipend compared to the state universities. So PhD students in government universities have very small stipend, and they are not allowed to work, which results in a low quality thesis and deteriorates the opportunities for doctoral mothers, especially single and the only breadwinners in the family. So the next challenge is the lack of institutional strategic policies caused by bureaucracy and formality and at government universities. So PhD students have to do the responsibilities of their faculty, and they are forced to participate in conferences that are not relevant to their thesis and to do the administrative paperwork of their departments. And doctoral mothers suffer most coping with such less paid and unpaid workloads and maternity obligations. In spite of the fact Kazakhstan has a high investment, it spends much less on education, only 2.6% of GDP on education. So the other challenges were the lack of time and proper working space that were not meant for mothers who can come to the university and work because they have competing demands with males. As a result, they can have stress, mental or physical, and they become very less productive. And the next main challenge is the lack of early childhood education and a care policy in Kazakhstan. So all mothers, scholars from both universities stressed the need of a care policy review in the country, because government kindergartens take children from age 3 to 7. However, as they say, there is always a kilometer queue to the kindergarten after placing the children electronically on the waiting list. And the duration of maternity leave, as we know, according to the Article 99 of the code, is 126 days. So in addition to maternity leave, optional leave without pay for childcare can be granted up to 3 years. So here appears a question. How to afford private childcare without an additional financial support if one decided to dedicate himself to science and research? So the main outcome of these challenges is that there is a scarcity of financial support, institutional strategic policies, and a free care policy can result in mothers' less and inactive participation in science. So there are some strategies that the mothers have made during quarantine in the light of COVID-19. Many of them were publishing less because of the multiple roles. They adapted home office and home-based sport, and they have used gross motor skills, Pomodoro technique, and other social supporting groups. So the preliminary findings give some suggestions, like possible policy changes by government. So the first university, which was a leading and a very international, high developed university, and there were very less demands from the government because they have many facilities in the university. The only thing they wanted to have a special working place on the campus for mothers and funded courses or courses free of charge or with discount for their children. And the possible policy changes by the government universities were very huge. So I will try to sum up all of them. So they mainly focused on accelerating the process of enrollment to government kindergartens, obviously, which means to have more free childcare organizations. Because those who have newborn children, they have very lots of difficulties in balancing the motherhood and science, because there is a problem on giving the children to free government kindergartens. So accelerating the process or providing more free childcare organizations will be the first needed recommendation from them. So the second was about increasing the amount of stipend, because it's twice less than in international university in the country. Obviously, it means that the doctoral mothers try to work unofficially in other places in order to feed their children, which results in a very unproductive researching. And the next option, the next recommendation was to prolong 3 years of dissertation defense to 4 years, since it includes high publishing requirements. Because in other international universities, it's only 4 years, but in state universities, they have only 3 years, which is, as per doctoral students, is very little time. So the next was addressing both financial and human resources based on maternal priorities that can afford world-class research on model. Many doctoral mothers talked about the low that they don't have access to many databases, and they have many formalities that take up their most of the time. That's why they talked about the urge of developing the research model. Another recommendation they gave was about the traditional and religious thoughts about women's role through mass media, because many people now prefer social media, right? And they don't read newspapers, they don't watch TVs. No, maybe they watch, but the number of people who prefer reading social media is very huge. That's why.
Я извиняюсь, у нас время, если бы.
Okay.
Да, мы хотели
okay. The last will be to have a special child care, at least paid, but on the campus, where mother scholars can lead their kids for several hours. So the data collection is going on in Uzbekistan doctoral mothers. So the final findings will be comparison. So if you have any questions, you can ask me. Thank you very much for your time.
Unfortunately, sorry, we have not time for questions. Спасибо большое, Альмира. Пока Акбота подсоединяется, я хотела бы сказать, что исследователи делают большую работу, и, конечно же, вопросы... Акбота, вы пока подсоединяйте, пожалуйста, свою презентацию. И, конечно, у вас будут вопросы. Вы напишите сюда свои, пожалуйста, контактные данные. В начале июня у нас будет круглый стол по финальным результатам наших исследователей. Мы будем очень благодарны. Мы пригласим вас на это мероприятие. Спасибо, Альмира. Пожалуйста, Акбота.
Всем добрый день. Мое исследование, я очень кратко постараюсь, мое исследование называется Women in Informal Economy in the Light of COVID-19. So I decided to research how COVID-19 and affected women working informally, or as I will tell later, partly self-employed women, and how their challenges, how the challenges they are facing have been made worse by the pandemic. So first, I want to focus on the terms I use. Firstly, I use the term self-employment as it was given by, as it's given by our law on employment. So those self-employed workers are individuals who are independently engaged in the production of sales or sales of goods, works, and services. So I decided to focus firstly on self-employed women who, one way or another, report their bills, like they tax their income. So so they are somehow visible to the state, and they are visible on the market. And the next part are the other pool of my respondents are informally employed women who work without any form of registration, like they're not sole traders, they're not formally employed, so they have income, by producing or selling goods or offering services, but they do not report their income, and they do not involve in any formal like billing, taxing, and other practices. So I decided to focus on that. And the focus of my research is are women, and I decided to make interviews with self-employed women, and also informally self-employed women, to see what kind of challenges they face and what kind of challenges they face and what are their needs. So I mostly interviewed and still continuing interviewing women under 40, and among them there are 4 mothers, and at this time most of my respondents have higher education and some sort of support system, family, savings, opportunity to get additional training to expand their finances. And the findings are that the definition of self-employment and informal employment among interviewees are different. So I want to study the perception of these women, how they perceive themselves, and why they are not formally employed. So what stops them? What stops them from declaring their taxes? What stops them from making it formal? And I realized that firstly, women do not want to be formally employed because they don't see any benefits from that at a certain point of their work. So, for example, their job is too small, or is it just a side project, side job, and they don't want to pay any taxes at this point. And also the next big finding was that women create support systems for women. So they sell products, they sell goods and services for women, they offer services for women, and they are, and the other side, their customers are also women, and they support each other, and that's kind of creates a big support system where women support themselves economically. And also self-employment is a huge earning opportunity for mothers with children, and that's their way of coping with uncertainty and precarity of motherhood. And at this point, I am continuing to make interviews, and I hope I will have more elaborate results soon. So that's it for this. This is it, and thank you very much for your time.
Спасибо большое, Акбута, и мы приносим свои извинения за небольшую задержку в связи загрузки нашего видео. И просто резюмируя все вышесказанное, да, действительно, исследователи продемонстрировали, что пандемия оказывает влияние как на мужчин, так и на женщин, но все-таки большее негативное влияние пандемии оказывается на женщин в силу существующих гендерных ролей, гендерных стереотипов, неравенства и дискриминации. И мы надеемся, что наши исследования внесут свой вклад в развитие программ по смягчению и преодолению негативных последствий. Всем спасибо за внимание и успешной дальнейшей работы. До свидания.